And good morning, everybody. My name is Sira Fai, and I'm one of the program officers for Thriving Communities. We're very excited to have you here, so thank you again. I just wanted to go over the housekeeping slides before I turn over the presentation to my team. If you have questions, we are going to be answering them in the Q&A, so make sure you drop your questions in the Q&A section of Zoom. Just please note, everyone is muted during the webinar. If you do have technical issues, you can send a message in the chat. We will be checking that actively. Also, the webinar is being recorded, so we can share that with you all after. And the presentation deck is also going to be made available to everyone. And finally, if you have any if you have any questions after the webinar, you can email us at thrivingcommunities@ghhi.org. The information is also on our website, and all that information will also be in the PowerPoint presentation, which we'll send. So thank you very much, and I'm going to hand it over to Ruth Ann Norton, who is our CEO and President.
It's good to be with you. I want to just make sure that we've got the recording going. I'm going to go ahead, if we got that, there you go. But good morning, everyone. We are so thrilled to be able to talk about the EPA Region 3 Thriving Communities Program and the ability to provide funding for environmental justice, environmental health, climate, and equity efforts throughout the region, rural and urban communities, the Chesapeake Bay to coal country in Appalachia. And today our focus is with our partners from Appalachia Voices to focus on the state of West Virginia. And we've invited a member of our advisory board who's a neighbor up in Pittsburgh to join us. I'm so pleased to have our advisory board member, Michelle Nacardi-Chapkas, who is the executive director or president, I'm not sure which we call you, or chief of Women for a Healthy Environment, one of my great heroes in the work in environmental justice. So Michelle, I'd love for you if you would kick us off today, and then I'll bring it back and keep us going.
Great. Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for having me. It is an absolute pleasure to be here. As you heard, I am Executive Director at Women for a Healthy Environment, and our organization is based in Pittsburgh, and we focus in Western PA. And then we have a remote office actually in Philadelphia as well. And so we like to span both sides of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Our organization focuses on the environmental exposures that impact public health, and we do that by focusing on things like clean water. We've done studies on PFAS, and we've done a lot of work in the lead and drinking water space. And then we also care about clean air. Being in Pennsylvania, in southwestern Pennsylvania, we have a lot of those point sources, that industrial activity that happens in our own backyard. And so we really focus on both outdoor air quality as well as indoor, and have done some studies on looking at childcare centers and when you install filters in those spaces, what that looks like and how it improves the environment. Our main work focuses in three main program areas: healthy homes. We have community health workers who go out into residents' homes and communities and do environmental health assessments, as well as healthy home assessments. And then in addition to that, we have our Healthy Schools program and Healthy Early Learning, our childcare spaces. And that really helps to provide technical assistance and guidance to all of the administrators in those learning environments. And we provide funding to really fix and remediate things like lead and radon and indoor air quality in those buildings, because our goal is really to help create places where children can thrive, where they can grow and develop in a way that benefits our next generation of leaders. And so with that, I wanted to just give you that little bit of background. We also do policy and advocacy work and work with GHHI very closely in that regard. So we want to advance policy initiatives. But let's talk about the Thriving Communities Grant-Making Program. This provides vital access to federal funds for community-based organizations who are tackling environmental justice issues at that local level. And so this grant program is really designed to help the local grassroots and community-based organizations build up that capacity to implement locally those driven solutions that really address these environmental justice challenges that we all face across the country. We truly believe that these funds will help transform disadvantaged and underserved communities like ours in Western PA and like yours right in West Virginia. And so we want to make these healthy, thriving communities that are capable of overcoming this historical, environmental, and public health challenges that we all face every day. So these federal grant programs are often out of reach for small organizations. They're lengthy, they're tedious, they're cumbersome applications, and the reporting processes are just as bad as the application processes. I know, we have been through that process and we try and navigate all those challenges. But the Thriving Communities program removes these barriers. It gives access by streamlining these processes and providing them multiple opportunities for technical assistance, which you can get right through this opportunity in working with GHHI. So the program provides an opportunity for West Virginia environmental justice groups to really tap into those vital funds that can have a significant positive impact on communities throughout the state. This is monumental. This is really changing communities. And this is a huge opportunity that I encourage all of you to participate in with us as the advisory board member and many others that are serving in this capacity. With that, I'll stop and turn it back over to Ruth Ann.
Thank you so much, Rachel. Really appreciate your guidance, your advice as we look to build the most accessible, fair, and equitable grant program as we move forward. I am really also delighted that in this work, as we talk about the grants program, it is really teamed up and aligned through the EPA with the Thriving Community Technical Assistance Centers. And I am just thrilled to welcome back my old friend, Quentin King. We go back a few years. We reminded ourselves who is heading up Appalachian Voices as a TICTAC or technical assistance provider for the state of West Virginia in partnership with the National Wildlife Foundation and the University of Maryland. Quentin, I signed up for your great newsletter yesterday. Thank you for promoting Thriving Communities. Tell us a little bit about what is offered on the technical assistance side, and then we'll come back and talk about the grants.
Sure, thank you very much. And I'm happy to be here and represent Appalachian Voices. Everyone knows Quentin King. I live in Charleston, West Virginia, native, born and raised West Virginian. I joined App Voices about over a year ago now, and we are environmental and development nonprofit in Central Appalachia. We work on preventing, stopping fossil fuel impacts and trying to create a new economy, I would say, in Appalachia. And we are happy to be a part of the EPA's Region 3 TICTAC, or the Thriving Communities Technical Assistance Center, which is goes hand in hand as counterpart to the Thriving Communities grant-making program. So the goal of the TICTAC is to provide assistance and capacity building resources to environmental justice communities and disadvantaged communities throughout the EPA's regions. We are one of the 10, there's a TICTAC in each of the 10, or the EPA's 10 regions, as well as national TICTAC, and a couple others, so a total of 16. And we are a hub within the Region 3. So we are helping the University of Maryland, the National Wildlife Federation, cover West Virginia and Southwestern Virginia. The other hubs include Empower DC, the South Baltimore Community Land Trust, Morgan State University, West Virginia State University, which is just down the road from me, Urban Kind Institute, and Virginia State University. So App Voices and these other hubs are going to help community groups find assistance and get assistance to help them move through the intake process of applying through the Thriving Communities grant-making program, as well as any other federal environmental justice grant, or even provide support in general for those organizations to be able to apply for private grants if they so choose. Our goal is to help develop organizations in their capacity. We are going to have a dedicated West Virginian staff member who is going to do workshops, webinars, events, face-to-face meetings throughout West Virginia and Southwest Virginia, as well as other outreach efforts. The TICTAC will have its own intake process to help identify and match experts that can provide each group with the assistance they need, whether it's grant writing help, planning resources, helping them discover ways to do pollution monitoring training, or even comms assistance. App Voices and our other partners are prioritizing making sure people on the ground are getting the federal resources they need. These are the people who know the solutions that are best for them. It's important that these solutions are developed by and in tandem with directly impacted people, so that these solutions can be self-sustaining beyond even the TICTAC's existence. I think that is all for me. I'm really happy to be here. Thank you, Ruth Ann.
We are so happy to have you. If you could put the link to the TICTAC in the chat. It's also in our materials. If you go to our Thriving Communities page, information on the TICTAC is there, but it would be great if people could contact you directly. I would appreciate that so very much. And if you have a chance to stick around during T&A or Q&A, maybe we might need to call on you again. And thank you, Quentin. Becca, and Sarah, if you could pull up the slides, we will go to our deck. And certainly now that we've got our spotlight introductions up, invite anybody who wants to come on camera. Was trying to just give our guests some spotlight there. And we want to welcome you to this and tell you a little bit about the Green and Healthy Homes Initiative. If you would, there you go. Our organization, founded 32 years ago, works at the intersection of health, housing, climate, and environmental justice. We were founded as an environmental, racial, and social justice organization, originally focused on the issue of lead poisoning and ensuring that every child could reach their full potential by not being poisoned by the toxic legacy of lead, and improve their outcomes in the classroom and in life. Today, our work spans across the United States, advancing a whole house approach to healthy housing to ensure that families can reach their full potential, from vulnerable children to older adults. We have had a great deal of success around the issue of lead, establishing some of the nation's best evidence on the impact of healthy housing measures on cost savings for the healthcare community, on moving new models of how we address asthma, and how we address the 40% of carbon emissions that come from buildings and residences. So when we take a whole house approach in our projects throughout the country, anchored by our flagship in Baltimore, we're addressing everything in the home, from lead paint hazards to issues around mold, mildew, moisture, pest management, indoor air quality, weatherization measures, doing full electrification, removing carbon-emitting appliances because of their impact on health, and adding solar. So families are able to get a full package of benefits. And then we look at those policy levers that can change, including how Medicaid managed care or hospitals can invest, how utilities can invest, how we're doing on improving school attendance, school outcomes, graduation rates, housing stability, housing value, and how we're moving the needle on equity in terms of who's being employed, and by our contractor relationships, our partner relationships in this work to do that. We do a lot of work on accessibility in our fall prevention work. I saw a note there. I don't know if it was around the GHHI, but this is the whole house model that we established with the White House, HUD, the Council on Foundations, and others back in the early 2000s, and have been advancing and have been just wildly enthusiastic to see this adopted by federal agencies, nonprofits, and other fields across the nation. If you want to go to the next slide. The way that GHHI approaches its core work is around an align, braid, coordinate model that not only works for healthy housing, but can work for so many programs that are listening today and that we'll be working with through the Thriving Communities process of how do we build a larger set of resources and support for environmental issues throughout the region and throughout the nation, but looking at the role of philanthropy, of government, building the case for private sector investment, and ensuring that we're doing the investments in our most disadvantaged communities. And in this program, we'll talk about that, particularly for eligibility for the Thriving Communities program. If you want to go to the next slide. So let me turn this over, if I can, to my partner and colleague, Michael McKnight, as well as Dawn Sanders. Michael is our Senior Vice President of National Programs and is a long-serving colleague with me at GHHI. Dawn Sanders is a little newer to our organization, thanks to Thriving Communities. We are so thrilled to have Dawn join our ranks. She is our Director of Compliance and Grants Management for Thriving Communities, and they're going to take you through the grants program, and then we'll come back and we'll do a question and answer session. Thank you, Dawn and Michael.
Thanks, Ruth Ann. So some broad overview of the Thriving Communities grant making program. The purpose is to, as our panelists discussed earlier, reduce those barriers, right, to make these federal grants around environmental justice issues more accessible, and that we'd have, community-based organizations, local organizations able to access these funds. The program was created as part of the Inflation Reduction Act a couple years ago, $600 million, across the country, and EPA's broken it up by different regions, and we'll kind of go into that, but it's a 3-year program. Next slide. So for our Region 3, it is the Mid-Atlantic region where West Virginia is, and there's $40 million of grants eligible under this program. And so we anticipate providing about 171 grants throughout this region, and that also includes there's some federally recognized tribes in Virginia that are also eligible to apply. And we are going to sort of formulate this program around not only providing funding to those local efforts, but also providing other support and resources. And we'll talk about that in this presentation as well. Next slide. So you heard from Michelle, one of our advisory board members, but one of the things that we're really excited about in making sure that we're designing this program and implementing this program to really serve the needs of communities throughout this region is in partnership with our advisory board. There's 11 member organizations from throughout the region, and they are sort of working with us to sort of make sure that the materials that we're utilizing, how we're delivering these services, are what would be the most helpful way for our communities to get these services, and to make sure that we are having an equitable and transparent process in terms of having these grants available, making decisions, and then sort of moving forward to support our sub grantees. And here's the kind of the list of our advisory board members. Next slide. So in the sub-grants that will be provided, the kind of the areas is, sort of we want to make sure that we're focusing resources within the community. We are building up the capacity of local grassroots organizations and partnerships through this process, that we are connecting, as I said, connecting our sub-grantees to other resources and technical assistance that can be helpful as they work on their environmental justice issues, and that this is, a way in which we can catalyze the, as Quentin was saying, kind of the long-term change And so it's not just a one-off kind of, process and grant, but can we use this opportunity to really build that longitudinal work? Next slide. So one of the requirements, because this is a federal grant and EPA is administering it, is that the project, not the applicant, but the project has to take place within a disadvantaged communities, and that is defined by this map that EPA has created, which takes a lot of different data and statistics. It sort of is able to kind of determine different census tracts as being disadvantaged or not. And so we do have sort of support around utilizing this map, getting to this map, looking at if you're sort of thinking through what effort you want to work on. We could support sort of showing you how to kind of get to that and see what area, and if that area has been determined by the EPA to be a disadvantaged community. If you're looking and where you want to work on may be outside of this or whatever, it's not like a hard, fast, yes or no. If there is something where maybe it's adjacent to a disadvantaged community or not a community, or there may be arguments that if you're working on a specific environmental justice issue, that it will end up impacting, not just the specific area, but a disadvantaged area. So there is flexibility. And so if you're, running into questions around that, please contact us. Next slide. So for eligible applicants under the Thriving Communities program, so nonprofit organizations, tribal governments, and intertribal consortia, Native American organizations, and then local governments are eligible. Not state governments, but local governments are eligible to apply, and institutions of higher education. Next slide. So for the possible environmental justice issues, they are pretty broad. EPA is coming out with, more and more feedback around kind of different aspects of what kind of efforts are eligible. So we will be continuously updating our Q&A and our materials around that. But if you're kind of thinking about ways to monitor and assess, air quality, both indoor air quality, outdoor air quality, climate change issues, mitigating hazards, both, with, indoor, outdoor. So it's a, pretty broad set of issues. One thing that we do not have on this slide, we'll be providing updates on that EPA provided guidance on last week, is that the federal funds cannot be used for protest activities. So kind of thinking about those kinds of efforts, they did provide that guidance, but pretty broad list. And if there are questions around what you're thinking about focusing on, please reach out to us. Next slide. So as I said, around 171 anticipated grants that will be provided in Region 3. And so they are broken into tiers, and we'll be talking about each one. So Tier 1, we expect 60 awards, and these are 1 year, up to 1 year awards, and $150,000 as the maximum grant amount. And these are for assessments, so sort of kind of early stage, trying to get a good handle on the issue that is impacting the community. Tier 2 is planning projects, and we expect around 51 of these awards. These could be 1 or 2 year awards, and up to $250,000 in funding. And this is more, you've got a handle on the environmental justice issue, but you want to plan out how are we going to address this issue, what partners need to get brought into the discussion, and to help support the mitigation of that issue or that solution. And then the third tier is implementation projects. So this is where sort of the plan has already been formed. really just looking for resources to carry out that plan. And so we expect 50 of those awards. Those are 2-year grants and up to $350,000 in funding. So those are our 3 main tiers. And then besides those 3 main tiers, at the bottom, there also are non-competitive capacity building grants. So these are for designed for severely capacity constrained organizations that would not really be readily able to apply and compete for those other tiers. And so these awards are up to $75,000 1-year awards, and we expect to provide 10 of those. Next slide. So yeah, it's kind of going back to those tiers. So in that assessment tier, so these are 1-year grants, $150,000, thinking about things like monitoring, if there's an environmental hazard that's taking place in the community, but it needs to get monitored, sampled, there needs to be more information about the scope and scale of that hazard. If there needs to be surveys done, within the community, educating local community members and groups, that kind of fits into that tier 1 bucket. Then for tier 2, for planning, thinking about engaging the community, building out those partnerships, still doing, public outreach and campaign, potentially conducting trainings in order to mitigate the hazard and things like that. So those are 1 to 2 years. And then for tier 3, sort of project development or implementation grants. And so this is sort of carrying out the strategy, carrying out a plan, conducting actual mitigation of environmental hazards, all kind of fit within those tier 3 buckets. And those are the 2-year grants. Next slide. And one additional or a couple additional pieces around these non-competitive grants that are designed for those severely capacity constrained entities is that our advisory board, including Michelle, will be sort of working on kind of the criteria and selection of those 10 non-competitive awards of $75,000. So it will be, separate from the requests for applications process that Dawn will go into. We will obviously still need to collect some information around sort of what the effort involves and the organization, but it'll be a different process than sort of competing for these other grants. Next slide. And as I said earlier, we want to make sure that we are providing, the enough resources to help support our subgrantees as they take on these efforts. And so every subgrantee will have a program officer assigned to them that will be providing that support around, what the federal requirements that are needed in terms of compliance, how to make sure that funds are being drawn down regularly from GHHI, that reporting and that there's, an understanding of what reporting and what information needs to get collected. All of those things, there'll be a program officer assigned for every subgrantee. And then beyond that kind of direct support, we'll also be providing and with our partners providing technical assistance. So this could be if a local subgrantee is working on, some kind of policy that's impacted by state regulations, and they need, somebody to, research what those state legislations are, what they are, what they mean, what can be changed, what can't be changed. So we've got some technical assistance providers and partners that will be supporting our subgrantees as they're working on these issues. Also, we're in partnership with the Tic-Tac Center. Quentin is on here, so they'll also be a source of support for our subgrantees. And there also are national a national Thriving Communities grant maker that also has resources that can help. We've talked about things like translation services and things like that. So there's some broad support there as well. And then we also have sort of designed our program in a way in which if there is support needed from a specific subject matter expert that may be, the best expert for working on a particular issue, let's say it's coal or something like that, we have the ability to procure these outside experts to come in and support our sub-grantees. So we wanted to make sure that we've got kind of a broad set of different ways in which we can provide additional assistance to our sub-grantees. Next slide. And then these are some of our core technical assistance partners. Howard University, specifically their law school. So they'll have sort of law school professors and students that will be able to do that legal research, research on policies, research on legislation, as well as supporting organizations, in terms of like just overall organizational capacity. So if an organization is wanting to formulate a board for the organization, or have questions around 501(c)(3) status and other kind of things, we'll also have Howard University Law School to help support and advise. The Virginia Poverty Law Center is going to have staff that also is going to be available to kind of, research policies and legislations, things like that. Delaware State University, they've got sort of a community program and an environmental program as well that's sort of able to support organizations, both their internal capacity and working on issues. And then we also have Children's National Medical Center, which is a DC-based medical center that's as a technical assistance partner that has done a lot of work on health outcomes and public health and sort of tying that back to environmental conditions. So if there are, sub-grantees that we have that are really sort of interested in working on that environmental health connection, we've got our partners, Children's National, that will be providing technical assistance there. Next slide. And now I'll turn it over to my colleague, Dawn.
Thank you, Michael. Welcome everyone to our call. I'm going to go into details around the application process. I'm excited that the portal has launched for the Thriving Communities Grantmaking Program. It is on our website, and we have one official application as of today. So I'm very excited about that. We will be, as Michael mentioned, supporting your grant submissions for the 3 tiers of funding that are available. And as you notice, as Michael mentioned, we have our 2-year awards that are going to be due November 30th. So that deadline is going to be really important that you make note of that. And then we have a rolling deadline for our organizations who maybe want to apply for 1-year grant, maybe not ready just yet, but want to apply for something that's a little bit of a shorter time frame. And you have until April of next year. So this is a really great application opportunity because you're not going to miss the deadline, right? It's going to be a great opportunity for you to get your applications in early for those who choose to, but you do have up until April 30th or until funds run out to April 30th, 2025 to make application as well. Next slide. For our application, as I think Ruth Ann mentioned, and others have said on the presentation, there has been, GHHI has gone after this funding and has been selected because we are going to be making sure that this grant application process is accessible and there is a low barrier to the application process. There is a number of technical things that you normally have to do with a federal grant, and the pages and all of the uploads and all of the technical pieces that you have to add to an application. But for our specific grant, we're going to give not only opportunities for those of you who would like to apply online. We use the Flux Grants Management System that is going to allow you to upload your documentation. You'll be able to collaborate with your teams and those that are supporting the application process. You'll be able to work in the system together. But for those who are not necessarily wanting to use the Flux system or to use a technology submission process, it's perfectly fine to also mail in that information, and the Thriving Communities team member will take care of making that submission on your behalf. So you can either, again, work online or work in the document, download it from our system, from the Thriving Communities webpage, and mail it into our organization. So really wanted to make that accessible for you. And you should plan for approximately 4 to 8 hours in gathering your documents, responding to the criteria to be able to complete your information, and their support for your application submission process throughout the entire grant making program. Next slide. In your application, you're going to be focusing on 5 primary opportunities to submit materials that will support your submission. For your grant narrative, it is a 7-page narrative, and it will allow you to specifically drill down on not only your innovation, what your regional needs are, but to really talk about your organization and the great work that you're doing. We're going to also provide you that information online. You can look up all of that information and the details associated with your grant narrative, because you want to answer those questions that are outlined in that application narrative very specifically, right? But in addition to that, we've provided some templates. You don't have to use our templates that are online, but we have provided samples of budget and work plans that you can download and use those for your application submission process, or you can use your budget and your work plans that you have already developed as an organization. It's a really user-friendly process. We want to make sure that whatever documentation you submit, you just want to make sure that it has all the information necessary to be able to really have a great understanding of your work. And then your financial statements, we're going to advise that persons would refer to the FAQs and when you're submitting your application. So you could submit your 990s, you can submit your balance sheets, your profit and loss statements, your audits, those types of things. But we want you to make sure that you read the FAQ and that you're clear about the financial stewardship of your grant. We want you to use that information to reference so that you're submitting documentation that really highlights how you're going to manage and be fiscally responsible for the funding. In addition to that, we have a requirement of an A133 audit document for those who are receiving $750,000 or more in one fiscal year from the federal government. So it's not applicable to everyone, but for those who have received at least 750 or more in federal funding in 1 year, you would need to submit this documentation. In addition to the required documents, you also have opportunity to now showcase your organization by submitting visuals and other organizations that really showcase the great work that you're doing. We have the opportunity for you to upload a video, because although there's a 7-page narrative, sometimes a visual of what your actual program is and what your actual work is actually even more informative. So we give you the opportunity to add a YouTube video of no more than 2 to 3 minutes. You also can add a logic model, case studies, anything, newspaper clippings that really highlight and showcase your organization and the great work that you're doing in your region. Then lastly, you can also upload partner letters that are showcasing your commitment letters from partners that are collaborating with you on the project. It's not a requirement again, but it is something that you're able to do, and you have the ability to upload 3 partnership letters that support your work really well. In addition to being able to submit your application, as I mentioned, the Flux Grants Management System is open. There are office hours that you're able to attend to answer any questions associated with the submission process. We will offer those office hours twice a week, and you'll be able to pre-register and submit 1 question per organization around the specific questions of submission, around specifics around the application criteria, or any question you might have that's specific about the application and or submission process. Although this is not an ideation or brainstorming session, it does allow you to make sure that you have all of your questions answered prior to your submission. And so we look forward to supporting you in that way throughout the grant making process. For your application, all applications in the competitive process will be scored by a team of 3 reviewers who are going to score and apply a rubric to each of your responses, with the different sections, which are the community needs, project description, organizational capacity and needs, evaluation plan, and budget. You also want to make note of the page limitations. There are individual organizations that, as I mentioned, have already started their applications. And sometimes brevity is really important, but in other instances, you want to make sure that the persons reviewing your application really get a sense of what your organization is accomplishing and what work you're doing there. So you're talking to someone who may not be as familiar with your organization, and as much information as you can provide within the page restrictions are going to be important. Those applications, sections, and responses are going to be scored by, again, a team of 3 reviewers, and those scores are going to be weighed based on your response. So again, looking at the application criteria, looking at the specific page number, and then the rigor of your response should match the scoring of that specific session, answering all of the questions that are under each of the sections. That's going to be really critical. And then I just like to make a recommendation for those who are submitting their applications pretty quickly. I think that's perfectly fine if you have a great grasp of this particular initiative, but certainly lean on the TICTACs or the technical assistance providers to have them review your application in advance. They can give you as much feedback as you might need to be able to submit the best application possible. And then if for any reason you're not awarded the funding for the first round, you can actually resubmit your application for consideration. So again, we want you to be able to have someone take a look at your application before submission, take advantage of that resource, but also know that you are able to submit the application more than once, and each agency gets 2 submissions per application project. It's going to be important that each application that is submitted is reviewed in a timely process. I know that many of us have maybe completed applications before when you didn't quite know when you were going to hear back from the grant maker. And so for our Thriving Communities team, it's really important that we have not only a transparent process, but that you know that along the way, there's going to be indication that your application is under review. So inside the Flux Grants Management System, you'll be able to see the stages that your application is moving through. And the great thing is that you have a threshold review that's going to take approximately 15 days. So you don't have to worry if you're missing something, if for any reason you may have thought you submitted your balance sheet or your 990, and when we look at it, it didn't upload quite the way that it was supposed to. We can send your application back for that documentation to be added. So you don't have to worry about not submitting the correct documentation. We will have a threshold review that will go over all of the documentation that was added to your application. And if anything is missing, we'll send it back for consideration and for you to attach those critical documents. In addition, you should anticipate approximately a month and a half that's going to be time for grant review and deliberation around your application responses, and then around a 3-month process end to end for you to be awarded and under grant agreement for the Thriving Communities program. Next slide. As mentioned, there is lots of technical assistance and opportunity for you to keep abreast of our work. So you can visit the Thriving Communities page at greenandhealthyhomes.org/Thriving Communities. You can sign up for updates. You can actually see the link for entering into the grant portal. Again, the grant portal is open, so you're free to go and create a profile at this time and across your organization. Again, you can be in the portal at the same time, but you want to make sure that you go to the Thriving Communities page to find that link and then bookmark it so you can get back into it at any time. We also have a frequently asked questions section. You definitely want to download that and read that thoroughly, because there's information that's going to be pertaining to your application, and it will help you just be really resourced really well, as well as other webinars that we've completed and how you sign up for office hours, as well as submit any inquiries at our Thriving Communities at ghhi.org for our email. So definitely use our website for a resource in this process. As you previously heard from Quentin, the technical assistance providers for Region 3 are a great resource for you. So the National Wildlife Federation and the University of Maryland are going to be providing not only technical support, but they'll be able to ideate with you, brainstorm with you, help you in the development of your application to receive consideration. The primary goal or objective of those TIC-TACs and technical assistance providers is to provide under-resourced, overburdened, rural, and capacity-constrained communities with as much technical support as possible to complete an application. There's, again, capacity building around environmental justice and energy justice assessments, direct assistance with grant writing, which is literally unprecedented, but you don't have to hire a grant writer for this. You can literally get support from our technical assistance providers, as well as direct assistance around engaging with policymakers, government, business, industry, and decision makers for addressing environmental justice and issues. So again, the information for the Thriving Communities technical assistance provider is here on the slide, as well as their phone number and ways of reaching them. And you just schedule an appointment, and then you can have access to any of the resources that they will provide during the grant making process. Next slide. And so that is the conclusion of our presentation. We're going to take some questions and have time of question and answers right now. But we want to thank you for your time today. And again, you can reach us at thrivingcommunities@ghhi.org or by calling us at 443-687-7343. We're looking forward to supporting you and wish you the best in your grant submission process.
Fantastic, and thank you, Michael and Dawn, Quentin and Michelle. I know have moved on to other meetings. I know we have a number of questions, some of which we've answered online. Want to open up the lines. Please feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question or raise your hand on this. Robin will share, if we haven't already, Quentin's information, and make sure that gets to you and everybody who's attending today. All of the answers to questions will also be downloaded, added up to our frequently asked questions, and we will specifically answer the questions and send you back to the entire group answers to anything that we have. But let me start here with a question from Brian about the best way to determine the eligibility of a project. Ground rule number one, let's make sure it's in the EPA disadvantaged communities map, and that is firmly within the community. A couple of questions, and I'll ask Michael and Dawn to weigh in as well, or others. But a couple of questions to ask yourself. Are the monies being spent in and on behalf of environmental justice issues within the disadvantaged communities? So we are going to be very firm on maximizing all applications that are dedicated to that as a baseline criteria. And so that I think is the one baseline. Other thoughts or hints that Mike or Dawn that you want to give as an answer to this? And I would say we have the criteria up on our website, and in our Flux system, you can download it as well. If you have questions, our Thriving Community staff is very happy to do an office hour with you and go through that. Anything else that you all would add to that?
No, I think that's great, Ruthie. And the frequently asked questions should really address pretty much all of your answers. And then in the Flux system, you'll see it'll give you prompts according to the requirements as well.
I do want to remind people it should be all over these materials, and but if you have a question, please direct the question to Thriving Communities altogether at ghhi.org. We will promise you a prompt answer within 2 business days, hopefully the same business day where we can, and get in early because we expect this to start to move quickly to a much larger pool of requests. Second question I see here is what elements of stormwater systems are eligible to be funded, such as surveying existing pipes, utilities, replacing if needed? Mike, Dawn, do you want to chime in?
I can start. I think there's not going to be that much specific kind of like guidance, in terms of like what parts of what system you have to kind of think through it as you're sort of making your proposal. One thing that I will kind of point out is around the different tiers of activities. So the tier one is those kind of surveys and kind of doing like the monitoring of conditions. Tier two is the planning, and then tier three is like mitigation of environmental hazards and things like that. So if you're looking to do replacements or things like that, that would more fit into a tier three kind of project versus kind of surveying and monitoring as that. But I'll start there and see what my colleagues have.
No, that's great.
That's precisely what I was going to say. We have that tier, and I also want to say, if you're at very early stages, also do not forget that our advisory board will be giving out 10 grants for those ideas or initial ideas on work that are $75,000 if you are deeply resourced, strapped on this work. But I think the assessment and planning grants are so great to be able to be a linchpin to help you capture larger federal funding that's coming in, whether it's lead and water or stormwater management, or how to connect to your state government programs that are coming in from the EPA. So we have another, do we have any other questions from the audience? I know we've answered a few, including, yes, you can fund your staff as long as the work is for the disadvantaged communities. I think we've been talking about the map and making sure that doing that. And there is a question here. I said we would need to look into it more, but maybe Mike and Dawn, you have some thoughts on it, which is whether regional planning and development councils, LDDs, and those types of planning districts are seen as local governments. I think it's a great question. I want to double check, but maybe you know the answer on that.
I have not seen that, so I think that is a great question that we can take back and consult with the EPA on that.
I always said the smartest thing we can do is, if we're not 1,000% sure, we don't want to give any bad advice, we will research that. We will get that question back to the person who asked the question, as well as the group, and to the FAQs. Do we have any other questions that I am missing that have been asked? Sarah or Becca, anything that, I thought there was a couple of good resources also posted up from someone posted here. Carrie Stanton posted about the Region 3 tab, able to support related to brownfields. So please, Carrie has posted some information on that. Carrie, if you will put your contact information in, we will take it up, add it as a resource, and the group here, if you're still on the line, can add that as a resource. Brownfields are an important part of the work around environment, environmental health, and environmental justice. So if we have no other questions, I think we're going to bring us to a close. I want to remind people that this is a rolling application for the 1-year grants. That rolling application will end when in April, or when all of the funds are exhausted. We are going to be very thoughtful and very careful to try and ensure that we give every opportunity to the most disadvantaged communities to be able to put an application in. So we are not going to be so fast at giving all the money out that it doesn't reach in places that we've yet to reach or that people don't know. We're going to do our level best in doing that, being fair to applicants and fair in distribution across West Virginia and the region. The 2-year grants application deadline is in November of this year, so please pay attention. If you are going for the $350,000 grant, we are 60 days out or so, and so we want to make sure people pay attention to that. And we hope to get as many of those applications in as soon as possible. And a reminder that we will do clearance for the eligibility of your application within 15 days. Be in touch with you if we need more information. And we will render an answer within 90 days. We're going to hold ourselves to that accountability. Also, lastly, if you have any questions or run into any difficulties with our putting the application in, since it has just been launched, if you find any bugs, anything that's not working for you, please let us know. We will remedy that right away. And we really appreciate the feedback there as partners in this work to advance environmental justice and equity. I want to thank everyone who has pulled this together. We look forward to visiting with you soon in the state of West Virginia and throughout the region. And I thank you all for joining us to ensure that throughout Region 3, we ensure that every family has access to a thriving community. So I'll turn it over to Sarah to say good night, good day, good afternoon, and thank you.
Well, I can't beat that goodbye, but thank you, everyone. And we will be sending out an email with some of the resources. And as we've mentioned before, we will be sharing the link to the video as well as the PowerPoint presentation shortly. So wishing you a good day and look forward to hearing from you. Bye-bye.